Journey to the Dark Web. Original author, unknown. To begin, I think I should explain to some readers the difference between the deep web and the dark web. The deep web was a place that was accessible online only by the use of special browsers, such as Tor, and it contains less than legal things, such as human trafficking, drugs, and hitmen for hire. The dark web was pretty much everything that is no longer available by conventional means, such as military websites and other sites that haven't been quite incorporated into the current internet architecture. With that in mind, what I would like to convey to all of you is my story of accidental journey into the unknown space known as the dark web. I'm a private technician by profession. I work for a company that is contracted by local businesses and private consumers to set up internet access, install software, and repair any sort of computer problems that they come up with. So, naturally, I have a lot of crazy stories and problems that these people do come up with. I swear, some of these people don't know how to work a computer, even in this day and age. Anyway, one day I got a call from a local business complaining that their internet was acting up, and that they, quote, must have a virus, end quote. So I shook my head, thinking that someone just unplugged a network cable, or downloaded some kind of Trojan horse accidentally. I got up and drove over to the business to address the problem. As soon as I arrived, the man who called immediately spotted me, and started going on and on about hackers, and how much he hated Microsoft Windows, and how many viruses it created, and all this other nonsense. I usually get this stuff when addressing business problems. He led me over to his computer, and I pulled out my laptop and sat down in front of it, and I began working. He told me good luck, and walked away to go do whatever it is he does in his downtime. So I opened up the browser that he used. No surprise, it opened up to about blank. It didn't even have a homepage. So I tried connecting to google.com, 404 error. Well, I know for a fact that google.com definitely existed, so there was some kind of problem with his internet. So I opened up his network and sharing center to see if I could use some kind of built-in troubleshooter to diagnose the issue. But I gave myself a well-deserved facepalm when I saw that it wasn't connected to any network at all. So I searched for networks and found a few wireless connections for him to connect to. They were all WEP encrypted, and I was almost positive that he didn't know the key. So I broke out a program on my laptop that ran a WEP cracking tool, just to get his computer up and running. As I was waiting for my tool to find the WEP key, another network suddenly showed up on my computer. This one was unprotected with an SSID, consisting of a random hexadecimal string. Now, I was extremely bored, waiting for this guy to show back up. So I decided to connect to it and take a little look around and see where it was coming from. I connected with virtually no problems, and opened up my toolkit of cracking tools just to see if I could find a source for this connection. As I was having my fun hacking away at this unprotected network, my computer froze up, albeit for a second or two, but this didn't happen much and it caught me by surprise. I shrugged it off as poor internet connection speed and just kept going. A couple of minutes later, it happened again. And then a few minutes after that. Each time getting longer and longer. Weird, I thought to myself. What is up with this network? It was then that things started getting pretty interesting. After a long string of pauses, my screen flickered in and out a little bit, just out of nowhere. My browser opened itself up. Now I was worried that I somehow infected my own computer with some kind of malware by connecting to this network. I proceeded to close the browser and began to disconnect from the network, just before anything worse could happen. But I couldn't disconnect. No matter how many times I clicked the little disconnect button, my computer just wouldn't do it. Despite having everything else on my screen running fine. Fuck, I thought to myself. This is gonna be a long day. And just as I was about to hit the power button on my laptop for a hard reset, my browser opened up again. This time with a little chat box in it. Hello. I just stared at my screen for a couple of seconds, not quite sure what was going on. I want to talk to you. Now, I have heard about all these AI programs that were meant to simulate responses and conversations with people, and I was not impressed. This was one nasty virus. You need to leave this network now. This is your last warning. Maybe it's some kind of automated response program, a security thing to keep hackers out. I'll have to admit, I was impressed by that. I had never seen anything like this before. I'm telling you one last time, leave this network now. I don't know what made me do it, but I responded to the program. Or what? The next response, it scared me more than anything in this world has ever scared me. The program began listing things about me: my name, address, phone number, credit card information, my parents' names, their address. My heart sank in my chest, and all of the color immediately left my face. I couldn't move. I just sat there paralyzed with fear. What came next was even worse. Don't look at me like that. My webcam was on. You might see things that you'll regret. Suddenly, the most horrifying images you could ever imagine flashed up on my screen. Images of disemboweled humans, human sacrifice, detached limbs, cannibals eating people, video clips of mass suicide and firing lines. My heart was racing. My body was shaking in utter fear of the images I was being shown. They're seared in my brain. These are things that no one should ever have to see. I mustered the strength and left, and I hit the power button on my computer and slammed it shut. I ran to the bathroom and I threw up a couple of times. I was just drenched in sweat. I could barely compose myself. It took me about 20 minutes to even go back to my computer, and even then I had a hard time getting near it. I looked over at my client's computer and it was connected to a wireless network I was cracking earlier. It was working fine now. Just then, my client returned and thanked me for fixing his internet. I didn't say anything. I just got my shit and left. Going down the elevator with my laptop under my shoulder was just terrible. I wanted to leave that place and get my laptop replaced as soon as I could. 5th floor. 4th floor. Come on, come on. 3rd floor. 2nd floor. Come on, goddammit. Ping. Ground floor. Open up. Come on, come on. And just as soon as the doors opened, from behind me, a whisper. You really shouldn't stare. I immediately left the building and drove back to my office. Promptly gave my laptop to my boss. I told him that it wasn't working and I needed a replacement. I told him that someone had accidentally spilled coffee on it during my last trip and it short-circuited. In reality, I made a pit stop back to my hardware store and bought the most powerful magnet I could find and ran it over the hard drive several times. I wasn't risking ever turning that thing on again. So after a few short minutes of the better keep track of your shit speech, he took my laptop and told me that I would get my replacement tomorrow. It was probably the most satisfying thing I could ever hear. For a few days, everything went back to normal. No more AI chatbots, no more funky unprotected internet connections, no more disturbing shit popping up on my screen. I was safe. Until the nightmares started. I remember the first one I had very vividly. I even shudder when I think about it. But I'll tell you nevertheless. It began with me walking through a large city. I remember seeing all these giant buildings and people walking up and down the streets, on their way to work or shopping, whatever it is city people do. I found myself in front of a very large building. It was much taller than the rest of them, and for some reason, I wanted to go inside and take a look. So I walked through the front doors and took a look around. It was a pretty normal office building. People moving and talking on their cell phones and whatnot, just generally minding their own business. I realized that there wasn't really much to see here, so I turned around to leave. But something was wrong. The doors to the building were just gone. I walked forward thinking that they must have some new type of door that blends into the wall or something. But nothing was there. I found myself very confused. I turned back around to ask the receptionist where the exit was, but she was gone too. Everyone was gone. The lobby was empty, no sounds, no people, no furniture. Just a big empty white room. Now, I was scared. I began to panic and pace around the room, looking for any way out, but there was nothing, nowhere to go. So I began to run at the walls, trying to break them down, and my attempts were all futile. After about 4 or 5 bum rushes against the wall, I sat down out of breath, just staring at the floor. It felt like I had been there for hours just staring at the ground. When suddenly, I heard a small whisper. I looked up to see a black silhouette of a man facing me. He stuck out his hand and whispered ever so slightly, "You trying to leave?" For some reason, I trusted this figure. Don't ask me why. I don't know, dream logic. But it felt like this figure was gonna show me the way out, somehow. So I took his hand and got up. "Yeah, can you show me the way?" "Of course. Follow closely." He turned around and began to hover away from me. So I followed. I don't know how, but he began to create hallways, staircases, all of these things out of the room I was trapped in, leading me all sorts of ways as though it was a great labyrinth or something. We climbed up and up and up, until we finally reached a hallway with a door at the end of it. It was then that he stopped moving and turned back to me. I could make out a very faint smile on his face as he pointed me towards the door. "Is that the exit?" "It is." I was so happy to finally get out of this place, so I grabbed the door handle and began to turn it. As he placed his hand on my shoulder, I turned to look at him, and his very words made my heart race. "But remember, you shouldn't ever stare." My eyes widened as his face began to morph into a horrid creature. His teeth became razors, his mouth was full of fire. I threw him off me and opened up the door, but it was only to find my worst fear behind it. Dead people hanging from the ceiling covered the room like wallpaper. I screamed, but nothing came out. I turned away from the room and ran as fast as I could the way I came. But it wasn't long before I realized that I was hopelessly lost in this labyrinth that this demon had led me through. I ran and ran and ran, but I couldn't find a way out. There was no way out. I was trapped in this nightmare. I started hurling myself at the wall in an attempt to leave this evil place, but nothing was working. I thought I was going to die there. But that's when I woke up. I was absolutely just drenched in sweat. My heart was racing and I was breathing pretty heavily. I looked around and it took me a few minutes to realize that it was all a nightmare. A horrible, horrible nightmare. I got up out of bed and walked over to my bathroom. I washed myself off of all the sweat I just doused myself in. As I washed my face, I noticed something in the mirror. A small light coming from my room. I turned around and I saw it, sitting at the foot of my bed. My personal laptop. I slowly walked over to examine it, thinking that I had accidentally left it there before going to bed, which I almost never do. So I bent down to pick it up. The command prompt was open, but it was blank. No prompt or anything, just that little black box flashing at me. Then I remembered that I didn't even use my computer before bed. In fact, I had left it in the kitchen. Then my webcam light turned on. The command prompt began to type. "What's the matter? Bad dream?" Now, immediately after seeing this, I did what any person would have done. I removed the battery out of my computer, threw it in the safe that I kept in my bedroom, and locked it down tight. And I didn't sleep for the rest of the night. I just sat at the edge of my bed staring at the floor, absolutely paralyzed with fear. This was no ordinary nightmare. This was real. For the next few days, I had the same nightmare every night. Each time was as traumatizing as the first. And worst of all, each time after waking up, I could hear my laptop fan inside that safe. I knew what it was doing, but I never looked. I didn't want to see that message again. I didn't want to scar myself even further. After 3 nights of experiencing the same terrible nightmare, I just stopped sleeping. I couldn't have seen those horrible images anymore. I couldn't face that demon anymore. It was just too much for me. I kept myself up with caffeine and vitamin B. My motor functions sharply declined and my cognitive ability deteriorated after the second consecutive night. I was so weak, so tired, and just so afraid. On my 3rd day of self-induced insomnia, my boss walked over to me and gave it to me straight. "You look like dried up dog shit, man. Go home and get some rest." I looked up at him. I wanted to tell him so badly, but I know if I did, he would just tell me to get my shit together and to come back tomorrow. So I just nodded in agreement, picked up my stuff and walked out. As I was driving home, I turned on the radio to help keep me awake. I had not slept in almost 60 hours, but instead of my favorite tunes, all that came out of my car speaker was static. Just a bunch of white noise. I started changing channels, but everything was the same. Static. So I turned it off and drove home in silence. As I pulled into my driveway, I noticed that through my front window there was a flickering light from inside my house. It was my TV. I had left the damn thing on before leaving to work. I wasn't surprised though. Not sleeping for 2 consecutive nights definitely was taking a toll on me. I put the car in park and started to pull the keys out when suddenly the radio turned on again, more static than ever. Was I hallucinating? Oh Christ, I'm losing it.
No, you're not.
I almost fucking shit my pants. Did that come out of the radio? Either I've gone completely fucking nuts, or this is just extremely coincidental.
I'm still here, you know.
Holy fuck! This time I was sure that deep static had come out of the speakers of my car. I looked at my radio to see what station it was turned to, but the screen was just a bunch of random symbols and letters that didn't make any sense. I started to panic and I immediately turned off the car and almost ran to my house. No, they couldn't have followed me everywhere. They can't follow me everywhere. I locked my computer in the safe. This couldn't be happening to me. I whipped around and looked at my television, which I had forgotten was still on. And I swear to God, I had wished that the damn Teletubbies was on. In fact, there was nothing on. There was nothing but just static. No sound, no signal, just static. I almost fell backward in fear. The television sound came on so loud with static so audible. The white noise just filled the room. I could feel my heart pounding as my hands began to shake. No, please, no. The static was getting louder and louder until I couldn't even hear myself think. I covered my ears and just started shouting, "Stop it, please make it stop, please." And it stopped. I looked up slowly at my television. Nothing. Just a black screen. It was off. I stood up slowly, still shaking from what had just happened. I walked over to the TV, fearing that it might turn on again and blow my eardrums out. I got right up next to the screen. I reached behind the TV and unplugged the power cord, and I just stared at it for a couple of seconds, hoping that I had stopped them from gaining access. I backed away slowly, breathing more evenly now. I had stopped it. And that's when I saw that face on my TV screen. That black silhouette from my dreams. It was here and it was real. He smiled at me with the most evil smile you could possibly imagine. And I just couldn't look away. I was too afraid to move. Suddenly, he began to speak to me in the most frightening voice imaginable. It was deep and booming. I was somewhat disoriented, as if he were speaking through a voice masker. It sounded like 10 voices in one. Every single one of them just as evil as every other one.
Do you fear me?
I couldn't move.
I said, Do you fear me?
My body was shaking uncontrollably.
Do you know these people?
The next images that I saw were the most traumatizing images in my lifetime. I saw pictures of my family, my friends, people I had met throughout life. He had them. This couldn't have been happening.
I told you not to stare.
Probably out of just sheer adrenaline, I snapped out of my paralysis and I picked up a small glass bottle sitting at the table next to me, and I hurled it at the TV as hard as I possibly could. Sparks flew everywhere. Shattered glass covered the floor. I looked up at the TV and it was definitely broken. The screen had cracked and it was just no longer functional. The demon was gone. I mustered up what strength I had left and walked out of the room. I was just so tired. I fell to my knees and began to cry. I just cried. And suddenly, I heard it. My laptop fan. I slowly raised my head and there it was, sitting at the edge of my bed. The command prompt was open. The webcam was on. The screen read, "That wasn't very nice." I screamed as loud as I could, "Leave me the fuck alone!" I picked up the laptop and threw it out of my window as hard as I could. This was going to end today. I walked over to the window where I had thrown out the computer just to make sure that it had shattered. I wanted nothing to be left of it. But as I looked out the window, I didn't see any broken laptop. I saw him looking up at me, smiling. I backed away from the window. I couldn't think. I couldn't comprehend anything at the moment. He was real, and he was here. I backed up into my room and slammed the door shut, and I just sat in front of the door, trying to formulate some kind of escape plan from this thing. Or more importantly, how to rid myself of this demon forever. I immediately stood upright. He was banging at my front fucking door. Again, I heard it. He wanted in. I heard him knocking over and over and over again. The incessant pounding on my front door, always in threes. I began thinking frantically, what was I gonna do? Should I stay here? Should I get a weapon? Should I call the police? I didn't know. I had no idea. The knocking continued. I was pacing my room, desperately trying to think of what to do. My heart was racing. My body was running on pure adrenaline at this point. And suddenly, as if perfectly on a cue, the knocking stopped. Was he gone? Did he just decide to leave? I had to be sure. I slowly opened my door and looked around. Nothing. I moved out of my room and towards the stairs and peeked down. Still nothing. I went down the stairs and saw my broken TV, and the shattered glass was just everywhere on the floor. Was it over? I made my way into the living room. I began to feel cold. Very, very cold. I looked around to see if I could find my thermostat, but something caught my eye. My front door. It was wide open. I swear to God, I almost had a heart attack right there. Was he inside? I had no way of knowing, but the first thing that came to mind was to close the door in case he wasn't. So I ran over to the door and slammed it shut. It wasn't cold anymore. I slumped down back against the door. I was so tired. More than anything in the world, I just needed to sleep. So my back's against the door and my eyes began to close. My muscles started relaxing. My breathing slowed. And right as my eyes shut and the shroud of sleep began to come over me, his face was right in front of me. Eyes snapped open, and I saw his face right up against mine. He was staring at me, smiling. I had no strength left to do anything about it. He slowly stood up and reached out his hand. He said to me in that evil little whisper of his, "Get up. I want to show you something." I shook my head in disagreement. There was no goddamn way I was following him anywhere. He was going to try to force me to live that nightmare. He was going to finish killing my mind before he destroyed my body. I said, "Get up. You have no other choice." All I could do was just look at him. I stared into his amorphous face. It was like I was looking right through him. "You know what I can do. Now get up." By this point, it was clear. He wasn't going to let me die there. He wasn't going to leave me alone. He wanted me for himself. And he was right. I didn't have another choice. So I raised my hand up and grabbed his arm. Somehow, as if my legs were moving by themselves, I began to follow him up the staircase. He was going to torture me. We started walking towards my bedroom. The door was shut. As we were just in front of my room, he looked at me. He smiled. I knew that there was no way out of this. I had no strength left to run. I didn't even have strength left to think. No strength left to feel. So I grabbed the handle and I opened the door. I looked inside expecting to see dead bodies and burning flesh and all this horrible shit. But what I saw was something that caught me by surprise. It was my laptop, the one I had thrown out of the window just a few minutes earlier. It was sitting on my bed. The demon walked into the room and stood at the foot of my bed. He just looked at me and he said, "Come, you need to use this device." So I walked forward once again, as if not by my own will, and sat on my bed, picked up the computer. Nothing was open. It was just my desktop with the regular icons. Nothing strange at all. This, now that I think about it, it was probably the most strangest thing out of all of them. It's been a very long time since I had spoken with a human. I was too tired to respond. I forgot how fun it was to distort your world and watch you break down in fear. Somehow, I managed to say, What do you want from me?" "I could ask you the same thing. You were the one who brought me here in the first place." I was so confused, so tired. I just wanted him to kill me at this point. "I'm not gonna kill you. There's no fun in that." I knew what he was saying to me, and I really did try to feel something about it, but there was just no way. I was too depleted. I was just an empty shell. "I'm gonna give you two choices now. Two very important choices." I looked up at him with the most lifeless stare I could have. "Listen closely, because I won't repeat this. Your first choice is to live the rest of your days with me. I could have great fun with torturing you for the rest of your life." I had no response. "Or you can choose to send me to another, because I would love a change in scenery." All I could do was just stare at him. Then out of nowhere, I found the strength to say, "I fucking hate you." He smiled at me when I said this. He leaned down and put his face right next to mine. And he said, "Make your choice, human." And suddenly a window popped up on my computer. It looked like a VPN client. Some sort of network was being hosted on my computer. And for some reason, I don't think I'll ever understand, the SSID is permanently seared into my memory. 4920-414-D205-04-149-4D4F4E. For a few moments, nothing happened. I was the only one on the network. Then, out of nowhere, a message appeared on the screen that read, "Someone had joined your network. Would you like to welcome them?" The demon began to smile, and once again, he said, "Make your choice." I clicked the little OK button and a chat box opened up. I began to type, HE L-L-O. Following that night, the demon that had been haunting me left my life. Period. He vanished as soon as I sent the message, along with the computer that was sitting on my lap. I wanted to feel some kind of remorse for what I had done. Hell, I wanted to feel anything, but all I could do was close my eyes and sleep. When I woke up, I looked at the clock and discovered that I had slept for over 26 hours. It was the first sleep I've gotten in over 3 days. It had been several years since my experiences with that demon, and I've been using a public computer to write these stories down. I'm just too afraid to do it on my own again. And it has taken me that long to muster the courage to tell my story to the people of the world, to warn them that the demon is likely still out there, torturing people for his own amusement, forcing them to pass him on to more people through their internet connections. Beware. He is out there somewhere. He is out there looking. And he will give no mercy. I would like to take this opportunity to thank all of the lovely patrons currently listed on screen: Dan R., Paul Z., Cody V., Chaos X, Mr. Swiston, Official Jerboa, JY Pyromancer, Hayden MH, Ethan A., Dark Side of the Bear, Daniel H., and Maximilian Charles P. Guys, thank you so much. If you want to suggest stories, even Patreon-only stories, or anything like that, head over to the Patreon and check out all the little rewards I have. I even have one for if you want to do a bit part in one of my stories. So go check that out. Thank you.